It was a cool autumn evening in Austin, Texas. The streetlights cast a soft, golden glow across the quiet cul-de-sac where Sarah and Michael Patterson lived. Their home, a cozy one-story house with a wraparound porch and flower beds Michael tended with care, was the kind of place that felt inviting even to passers-by. The newlyweds, only 6 months into their marriage, had spent the evening enjoying takeout pizza and flipping through streaming shows, a rare moment of relaxation in their busy lives. Sarah, a nurse at a local children's hospital, had just started cleaning up the dishes when a faint knock echoed through the house. Michael, a high school English teacher with an ever-curious nature, furrowed his brow as he set his book aside. "Are we expecting someone?" he asked, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 9 p.m., a time when unexpected visitors were rare. "No," Sarah replied, drying her hands. "Maybe a neighbor?" Michael opened the door to find a disheveled woman standing on their porch, cradling a small, blanket-wrapped bundle in her arms. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken with exhaustion and worry. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Sarah quickly joined Michael at the door. Her eyes fell to the bundle in the woman's arms, a baby, no more than a few months old. His cheeks were flushed, and his tiny fists peeked out from under the blanket. "What's going on?" Sarah asked gently, her instincts as a nurse kicking in. The woman hesitated, her lips trembling as she tried to find the words. "His name is Ethan," she whispered. "He's my son, but I can't care for him. He's paralyzed. I've tried everything, but I can't do it alone. I know this is asking too much, but I heard you're a nurse." She looked pleadingly at Sarah. "He needs someone who can give him a chance." Michael exchanged a glance with Sarah, both of them grappling with the weight of the situation. The woman handed Sarah a crumpled envelope. "There's a letter. It explains everything. Please, take care of him. I can't stay." "Wait," Michael said, stepping forward. "You can't just leave like this. We need to." But the woman had already turned and disappeared into the darkness. They called after her, but the sound of her hurried footsteps faded into silence. Sarah looked down at the baby, who stirred slightly, his dark eyes barely opening. "Michael," she said softly, her voice trembling, "we can't leave him like this." Michael ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "We have no idea who she is, or what we're getting into." "I know," Sarah replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But he's here. He's helpless. We can't just turn him away." Reluctantly, Michael nodded, his protective instincts kicking in despite his reservations. Together, they brought Ethan inside, setting him gently on their couch. The letter the woman had left sat untouched on the coffee table. As Sarah began to carefully unwrap the baby, Michael picked up the envelope. He hesitated before opening it, glancing at Sarah for reassurance. She nodded, her eyes filled with concern. The letter was short but heartfelt. To Sarah and Michael, "I'm sorry for burdening you with this, but Ethan deserves more than I can give him. He was born paralyzed from the waist down, and I've exhausted every resource trying to care for him. I've lost my job, my home, and my strength. But I believe in my heart that you can give him a better life. Please, love him as if he were your own. I will always be grateful." A desperate mother. Michael read the letter aloud, his voice breaking slightly. He set it down and looked at Sarah. "What do we do now?" Sarah looked at Ethan, who was now sleeping peacefully in her arms. "We start by giving him a home." And so, in one unexpected moment, Sarah and Michael's lives were forever changed. The following morning, the warm sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains of the living room, casting soft rays onto the couch where baby Ethan slept. Sarah had stayed up most of the night, rocking him in her arms, trying to soothe his soft, sporadic cries. Michael had joined her on the floor, leaning against the coffee table with the crumpled letter still in his hand. Both looked exhausted, the weight of their sudden responsibility heavy on their shoulders. "Do you think we should call the police?" Michael finally asked, breaking the silence. His voice was cautious, as if afraid to disturb the peace in the room. Sarah shook her head, her eyes fixed on Ethan's tiny face. "And say what? That a woman left her baby with us and ran? What if they take him to a shelter or foster care?" What if he doesn't get the help he needs? Michael sighed. We don't even know if she's coming back. This whole situation, it's insane. It is, Sarah admitted, glancing at him with tired but determined eyes. But right now, this little boy needs us. That's the only thing I'm sure of. Michael leaned forward, running his hands through his short, dark hair. Okay, he said reluctantly. Okay, let's figure this out. But we have to talk to someone. Social services, maybe? We can't just assume we can keep him. Sarah nodded but didn't respond. Deep down, she was already starting to feel attached to Ethan, even though she knew Michael was right. Later that afternoon, Sarah decided to read the letter again, searching for clues about Ethan's mother. She sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of her alongside a cup of coffee. Michael joined her, bringing his laptop to research local resources for abandoned children. Look here, Sarah said, pointing to the letter. She mentioned losing her job and home. That's not uncommon here in Austin. Rent's skyrocketing, and it's hard enough to get by with a stable income, let alone with a child with special needs. Michael leaned over to read the line she pointed to. It makes sense, he said. But why us? Did she know you somehow? Sarah shook her head. I don't think so. Maybe she heard about me from someone at the hospital. I work with enough families that it's possible. As they discussed Ethan's mother, Michael noticed Sarah's tone shift. You're feeling for her, aren't you? How could I not? Sarah admitted. She was desperate, Michael. That much is obvious. Can you imagine what it must have taken for her to leave him like that? The guilt, the heartbreak? Michael sat back in his chair, looking thoughtful. Yeah, I guess. But still, she could have done this differently. It's not fair to just show up and expect us to handle everything. Sarah reached across the table, taking his hand. I know it's not fair. None of this is. But what's done is done. Now it's up to us to make the best of it. That evening, as Sarah prepared a makeshift bed for Ethan in the guest room, Michael returned from a quick trip to the store with baby supplies, diapers, formula, and a handful of onesies. They worked together to set up the essentials, both of them fumbling through the unfamiliar tasks. Is it weird that I'm kind of scared of him? Michael asked as he tried to assemble a baby bottle. Sarah laughed softly. It's not weird. He's a baby, but he represents a lot more than that. Responsibility. Change. But we'll figure it out, Michael. Together. As they settled Ethan into the crib they had borrowed from a neighbor, Michael looked down at the sleeping baby, his small chest rising and falling steadily. I hope she's okay, he said quietly. His mom, she must have been at the end of her rope. Sarah nodded, brushing a strand of hair from Ethan's face. Me too. And I hope, wherever she is, she knows he's safe. For now, they decided to wait before contacting authorities, opting to focus on Ethan's immediate needs. Yet, both Sarah and Michael knew the woman's story, and her decision to leave Ethan would linger in their minds, pushing them to confront questions about sacrifice, responsibility, and the strength it takes to face life's hardest challenges. The days following Ethan's arrival were a whirlwind of adjustments, emotions, and challenges for Sarah and Michael. Their once predictable routine as a newlywed couple was replaced by late-night feedings, diaper changes, and countless phone calls to pediatricians and support groups. Ethan's needs were more complex than they had anticipated. His paralysis, coupled with his fragile condition, demanded constant attention and specialized care. One afternoon, as the Texas sun poured through the kitchen window, Michael sat at the table, cradling a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. He stared at the pile of unopened bills in front of him, a growing reminder of the financial strain they were facing. Across from him, Sarah was scrolling through her phone, her brow furrowed as she read articles about caring for children with disabilities. Did you know there are grants for families with special needs kids? Sarah said, breaking the silence. Michael looked up, his expression weary. Grants? For people like us? Or do you have to, legally adopt first? Sarah sighed, setting her phone down. That's what I'm trying to figure out. But even if we qualify, it's not going to solve everything. We're already stretched thin with just the two of us working. And now, she trailed off, glancing toward the living room where Ethan was napping in his portable crib. Michael leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I'll pick up some extra tutoring hours. Maybe I can talk to the principal about summer school programs. We'll figure it out. I can pick up more shifts at the hospital, Sarah added. Michael shook his head. You're already working so much, Sarah. If you take on more, you'll burn out. And if I don't, we'll drown in expenses, she replied, her voice tinged with frustration. This isn't about us anymore, Michael. It's about Ethan. Michael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I know, he said softly. I know. That evening, the tension between them came to a head during a particularly difficult feeding. Ethan, unsettled and crying, refused the bottle no matter how gently Sarah tried to soothe him. Michael hovered nearby, unsure of how to help. Maybe he's not hungry, Michael suggested. Sarah shot him a look. He hasn't eaten in hours. He's hungry. Something's just bothering him. Well, maybe you're holding him wrong, Michael said, immediately regretting his words as they left his mouth. Sarah froze, turning to face him. Are you serious right now? I'm the one who's been feeding him, changing him, staying up all night with him. While you're busy stressing over spreadsheets and schedules, Michael took a step back, stung. That's not fair, Sarah. I'm trying to keep us afloat here. Do you think it's easy to suddenly become a father overnight? And you think it's easy for me? She snapped. We're both overwhelmed, Michael, but standing around criticizing isn't helping. Ethan's cries grew louder, cutting through their argument. Both of them fell silent, guilt settling over the room like a heavy blanket. Sarah turned her attention back to Ethan, her voice softening as she whispered to him. Michael exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to snap. I don't know what I'm doing, Sarah. I'm scared I'm going to screw this up. Sarah glanced at him, her anger dissipating. Me too, she admitted. But we're in this together, right? We have to be. Michael stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. Together, he agreed. As the weeks passed, they began to find a rhythm, though it was far from perfect. Sarah reached out to a local support group for parents of children with disabilities, attending virtual meetings and gathering resources. Michael, true to his word, picked up extra work to help with expenses, often staying late at school to grade papers or tutor struggling students. Despite the challenges, moments of joy began to shine through. Ethan's giggles during playtime, the way he clung to Sarah's finger, the way his dark eyes lit up when Michael read to him. All of it reminded them why they had chosen to keep him in their lives. One evening, as they sat together on the couch with Ethan nestled between them, Michael looked over at Sarah and smiled. You know, he said, I think we're actually doing okay. Sarah laughed softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. We're surviving, she said. That's something. And maybe, Michael added, glancing at Ethan, we're even starting to figure out what it means to be a family. Life had begun to settle into a fragile routine for Sarah and Michael. Between juggling their jobs, caring for Ethan, and navigating their newfound roles as parents, their days were exhausting but meaningful. On a warm Saturday morning, as Sarah rocked Ethan in her arms, Michael stepped into the backyard to catch a moment of fresh air. Their backyard was modest but serene, a patch of lawn framed by a wooden fence with a small garden that Michael tended whenever he had time. He was about to water the tomato plants when he noticed movement near the fence line. A scrappy, small dog, no more than a few months old, was sniffing around the bushes. Its coat was a patchwork of white and brown, dirty from neglect, and its ribs were faintly visible under its thin frame. Hey there, Michael called out softly, crouching down. The dog froze, its ears perked up, and it watched him with wary eyes. It's okay. I won't hurt you. Michael slowly extended his hand, but the dog backed away, clearly unsure whether to trust him. He sighed and went inside, returning moments later with a small piece of leftover chicken. Placing it on the ground a few feet away, he stepped back and waited. Sarah appeared at the back door, holding Ethan. What are you doing? She asked, watching as the dog hesitantly approached the food. Stray, Michael replied, nodding toward the scruffy pup. Looks hungry. Poor thing's all skin and bones. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, gently bouncing Ethan in her arms. What are you planning to do? We can't take in a dog right now, Michael. We barely have time for ourselves. I know, he said, watching as the dog scarfed down the chicken. But I can't just ignore him. Over the next few days, the dog, who Michael had nicknamed Rocky, kept returning to their backyard. Sarah remained skeptical, especially as Rocky started scratching at the door whenever he smelled food cooking. "This dog's persistent," Sarah said one evening, crossing her arms as she watched Rocky through the window. Michael shrugged, pouring kibble into a small bowl he'd bought on a whim. "What can I say? He likes us." "Michael, we don't have the time or energy for a pet," Sarah argued. "Ethan's already more than we can handle." "I get it," Michael said, setting the bowl outside. "But I think Ethan might like having him around. Maybe he could be good for him." Sarah rolled her eyes but didn't protest further. One morning, as Sarah was sitting with Ethan on a blanket in the backyard, Rocky approached cautiously. Ethan, who had been fussing moments earlier, went quiet, his dark eyes wide with curiosity as the dog sniffed around him. When Rocky gently nudged Ethan's tiny hand with his nose, Ethan let out a delighted giggle, the first Sarah had ever heard. "Michael," she called, her voice filled with surprise and excitement. "Come see this." Michael rushed outside, grinning as he saw the interaction. "Well, looks like someone's made a friend." Rocky, emboldened by Ethan's laughter, lay down beside him, his scruffy head resting near the baby's tiny legs. Sarah watched the scene with a mixture of amusement and resignation. "Fine," she said with a sigh. "He can stay. But you're responsible for him, Michael." "I'm serious." Michael beamed, kneeling to scratch behind Rocky's ears. "You won't regret it, I promise." As the weeks passed, Rocky quickly became an integral part of their lives. He seemed to have a sixth sense when it came to Ethan, always staying close and reacting to his every sound. If Ethan cried in the middle of the night, Rocky would bark softly, alerting Sarah or Michael. During Ethan's therapy sessions, Rocky would sit patiently beside him, wagging his tail encouragingly as if cheering him on. One particularly difficult afternoon, when Ethan was inconsolable, Rocky climbed onto the couch and rested his head on Sarah's lap, as if offering her comfort. Sarah, overwhelmed with emotion, found herself scratching behind his ears. "Okay, Rocky," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You're officially part of the family." Rocky's presence didn't solve all their problems, but he brought a lightness to their lives they hadn't realized they were missing. For Sarah and Michael, he was a reminder that even in the midst of chaos, unexpected blessings could find their way into their hearts. Ethan and Rocky's bond grew stronger with each passing day. What had started as cautious curiosity between a baby and a stray dog soon evolved into a profound connection that neither Sarah nor Michael had anticipated. Rocky seemed to intuitively understand Ethan's limitations, and his gentle, protective nature made him the perfect companion. One afternoon, Sarah spread a colorful blanket on the lawn for Ethan's therapy session. The physical therapist, a patient woman named Karen, had been working with Ethan twice a week to encourage muscle activity in his legs, even if there were no guarantees of improvement. "Okay, Ethan," Karen said with an encouraging smile, "let's try some gentle stretches today. We'll work on moving your hips." As Karen guided Ethan's tiny legs in slow, deliberate movements, Rocky lay close by, watching intently. Sarah sat nearby, her hands folded tightly in her lap, as she tried to hide the anxiety she always felt during these sessions. Ethan let out a small whimper, his discomfort evident, and Rocky immediately perked up. He inched closer, resting his head on Sarah's knee and wagging his tail softly, as if to say, "It's okay. I'm here." Karen paused, glancing at Rocky. "I've worked with a lot of kids, but I've never seen anything like this," she said. "He's so attuned to Ethan." Sarah smiled, brushing a hand through her hair. "He just knows. It's like he was meant to be here." Ethan's cries quieted as Rocky gently nudged his cheek with his wet nose. The baby let out a soft giggle, and Sarah felt her heart swell. These small moments of joy were what kept her going. Later that evening, as Sarah prepared dinner, Michael sat on the floor with Ethan and Rocky in the living room. Ethan lay on a soft mat, surrounded by toys, while Rocky sat beside him, his watchful eyes never leaving the baby. Michael picked up a small stuffed animal and dangled it in front of Ethan. "Look, buddy, it's Mr. Bear." he said in a sing-song voice, trying to coax Ethan into reaching for it. Can you grab it? Ethan's tiny hand twitched, and he made a small sound of effort, but his fingers didn't quite close around the toy. Michael leaned back, sighing. It's okay, bud. We'll try again tomorrow. Rocky, however, had other plans. He picked up the stuffed bear gently in his mouth and placed it closer to Ethan, his tail wagging encouragingly. Did you see that? Michael called to Sarah, laughing. I think Rocky's a better teacher than I am. Sarah peeked her head into the living room, smiling. He's got the touch, that's for sure. Ethan, emboldened by Rocky's gesture, made another attempt. This time, his fingers brushed against the toy, and he let out a delighted squeal. Rocky barked softly, his excitement matching Ethan's. Michael leaned down, grinning. Good job, Ethan. And good job, Rocky. You're quite the team. The nights were when Rocky's bond with Ethan truly shone. If Ethan stirred in his crib, Rocky would nudge the nursery door open with his nose and let out a low bark to alert Sarah or Michael. More than once, they had found him lying beside Ethan's crib, his watchful eyes keeping vigil until the baby fell back asleep. One night, Michael woke to Rocky's insistent barking. He hurried into Ethan's room, finding the dog standing on his hind legs, paws against the crib, barking urgently. Michael's heart raced as he turned on the light. Ethan had managed to wiggle too close to the edge of the crib, his small body teetering dangerously. Oh my God, Michael whispered, scooping Ethan up and holding him close. Thank you, Rocky. When Sarah rushed in moments later, Michael explained what had happened. She knelt beside Rocky, wrapping her arms around him. You're a hero, you know that, she said, her voice thick with emotion. From that night on, Sarah and Michael trusted Rocky implicitly. He wasn't just a dog. He was Ethan's guardian, a part of their family in every way that mattered. Over time, it became clear that Rocky's presence wasn't just comforting, it was transformative. Ethan began to smile more, giggle more, and even attempt small movements during playtime with Rocky. For Sarah and Michael, these moments were a glimmer of hope, a reminder that love and perseverance could create miracles, even in the face of uncertainty. The day of Ethan's next medical appointment arrived, bringing a mix of anxiety and anticipation for Sarah and Michael. They had been working tirelessly to give Ethan the best care possible, but every doctor's visit felt like a pivotal moment, a chance to learn something new about his condition or, perhaps, to hear news they weren't ready for. The pediatric neurologist, Dr. Lauren Patel, had been following Ethan's case since his arrival in their home. A kind but straightforward woman in her mid-40s, she had a way of balancing professionalism with compassion. Her office was bright and welcoming, decorated with cheerful posters of animals and smiling children, a small effort to ease the nerves of families who passed through her doors. Sarah sat in the exam room with Ethan on her lap, her fingers gently stroking his dark hair. Michael paced near the window, unable to sit still. Rocky, despite not being allowed inside, waited patiently in the car, a fact that Ethan seemed to sense. He had been glancing toward the door ever since they arrived. Dr. Patel entered with a clipboard in hand, her expression warm but serious. Good morning, Sarah. Michael, she greeted. And hello, Ethan. You're looking handsome today. Ethan responded with a soft coo, his eyes bright. After a quick physical examination, Dr. Patel sat across from them and adjusted her glasses. So, she began. We've gone through Ethan's latest test results. There are some updates I'd like to share with you. Michael stopped pacing, his attention fixed on the doctor. Updates? Good or bad? Dr. Patel offered a reassuring smile. Let's call it cautiously optimistic. She explained that while Ethan's paralysis had initially appeared permanent, recent scans indicated some activity in his spinal cord. It wasn't much, but it was enough to suggest that his condition might improve with the right interventions. Physical therapy, combined with time and consistent care, could lead to small but significant progress. Now, I want to manage your expectations, Dr. Patel said, her tone gentle but firm. This isn't a guarantee that he'll fully recover, but the fact that we're seeing even minor responses is a good sign. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, her grip tightening on Ethan. So there's a chance? She asked, her voice trembling. There's a chance, Dr. Patel confirmed. It's going to take patience and hard work. But yes, there's hope. Michael sank into the chair beside Sarah, his face a mixture of relief and disbelief. We'll do whatever it takes, he said. Anything. Dr. Patel nodded. I can tell you both are already giving him so much love and care. That's half the battle right there. Now it's about building on that. The ride home was quiet at first, both Sarah and Michael lost in their thoughts. Ethan sat in his car seat, babbling softly, while Rocky lay curled up in the back, his head resting on his paws. Can you believe it? Michael finally said, breaking the silence. All this time, I was so scared to hope for anything. And now, Sarah reached over, squeezing his hand. It's more than we had yesterday. That's enough for me. Michael glanced at her, his expression softening. You're amazing, you know that? I don't think I could have gotten through any of this without you. Sarah smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. We're a team, Michael, and that includes Ethan and Rocky. We're in this together. That evening, they celebrated the news with a small family dinner. Ethan sat in his high chair, happily smearing mashed sweet potatoes across his tray, while Rocky watched from his spot on the floor, his tail wagging eagerly. Michael raised a glass of sparkling water. To Ethan, he said, his voice filled with emotion. And to hope. Sarah clinked her glass against his, her heart swelling with gratitude. To Ethan. As they sat together, laughter and warmth filling their home, the future still held uncertainty. But for the first time, it also held possibility, and that was more than enough to keep them moving forward. It was a quiet night in Austin, the kind that lulled the city into a peaceful rhythm. Inside the Patterson home, the dim glow of a nightlight illuminated Ethan's nursery. His crib stood near the window, framed by soft curtains Sarah had picked out, and a small mobile with stars and moons dangled above, gently swaying as the air conditioner hummed in the background. Rocky lay curled up on a blanket near the crib, his usual spot during the night. Ever since Ethan had joined their family, Rocky had appointed himself as the baby's unofficial guardian. Though Sarah and Michael were cautious about allowing a dog to stay so close to a baby, Rocky's loyalty had proven unshakable. Around midnight, Sarah and Michael were sound asleep when Rocky's ears perked up. A faint rustling noise came from the crib, followed by a soft whimper. Rocky immediately stood, his body tense with alertness. He moved closer, his keen eyes scanning the crib. Ethan, who had been soundly sleeping moments earlier, had shifted dangerously close to the edge. Ethan, still unable to control his movements fully due to his paralysis, had managed to roll partway to the side, his small frame teetering near the crib's edge. The guardrails, which Sarah and Michael always ensured were secure, seemed slightly lower on one side, just enough for Ethan's movement to pose a real danger. Rocky let out a sharp bark, his tail wagging nervously as he jumped up against the crib with his front paws. The noise startled Ethan, who let out a small cry, further tipping him toward the edge. In their bedroom, Sarah jolted awake. "Michael, did you hear that?" she asked, sitting up in bed. Michael was already on his feet, grabbing his glasses from the nightstand. "It's Rocky," he said, his voice tense. "Something's wrong." They rushed to Ethan's room, their hearts pounding. As they entered, they found Rocky standing on his hind legs, one paw on the crib and the other carefully pressing against Ethan's side, keeping him from falling. "Oh my God," Sarah gasped, running to the crib. She scooped Ethan into her arms, holding him close as her chest heaved with relief. Michael crouched down, wrapping his arms around Rocky. "Good boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're a hero, Rocky. You saved him." Rocky licked Michael's face, his tail wagging furiously as if to say, "I was just doing my job." The rest of the night was a blur of emotions. Sarah checked the crib's guardrails, tightening every screw and adjusting the height to ensure it couldn't happen again. Michael stayed close, holding Ethan, who had calmed down and was now babbling softly, seemingly unaware of the danger he'd been in. "Rocky knew," Sarah said, her voice filled with awe as she looked at the dog curled up near Ethan's crib again. "If he hadn't been here," Michael nodded, his eyes glistening. "He didn't just know, he acted. That dog has more sense than half the people I know." Sarah laughed softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. We owe him so much. The next morning, Sarah and Michael treated Rocky to a special breakfast, scrambled eggs and a slice of bacon, his absolute favorite. Ethan watched from his high chair, giggling as Rocky wagged his tail in delight. You're part of this family, Rocky, Sarah said, scratching behind his ears. And we're never letting you go. Michael nodded in agreement. If there were awards for hero dogs, you'd win them all. Rocky's heroic act became a pivotal moment for the family, solidifying his place not just as Ethan's protector but as a vital part of their lives. His presence was more than comforting. It was life-saving. And though the challenges ahead were still daunting, Sarah and Michael felt more prepared than ever, knowing they had Rocky by their side. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Michael often shared the story with friends and family, each time marveling at Rocky's instincts and bravery. It was a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they have 4 legs and wagging tails. The autumn air was crisp and cool as Sarah stepped onto the porch with Ethan bundled in her arms. She loved the way the season softened the edges of their neighborhood, the leaves turning golden and brown, the scent of wood smoke lingering faintly in the air. Rocky sat obediently at her feet, his watchful eyes scanning the street. It was a quiet day, the kind that made the chaos of their lives feel momentarily manageable. Michael was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, when a sound broke the tranquility, a hesitant knock at the door. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and for some reason, the knock felt different, tentative, almost unsure. She handed Ethan to Michael, who had come to the doorway to check on her. I'll get it, she said, her voice steady, though her stomach churned with unease. When Sarah opened the door, her breath caught. Standing there was a woman she instantly recognized, though her appearance was slightly different from that night months ago. The disheveled hair was now neatly combed, and her face, though still pale, carried a quiet determination. Hi, the woman said softly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I'm Ethan's mother. Sarah froze, her grip tightening on the doorframe. She hadn't prepared for this moment, though it had lingered in her mind like an unanswered question. Michael appeared behind her, holding Ethan. His expression shifted from confusion to guarded understanding. Come in, he said after a moment, stepping aside to make room. The woman sat on the edge of the couch, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Sarah and Michael sat across from her, Ethan nestled in Michael's arms. Rocky, as if sensing the tension, lay at Sarah's feet, his eyes fixed on the visitor. I'm sorry to show up like this, the woman began, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you after what I did, but I needed to see him, to know he's okay. Sarah softened slightly, though her guard remained up. He's okay, she said. More than okay. He's thriving. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Ethan. He looks so happy, she whispered. Thank you. For everything. Michael shifted in his seat, his tone measured but firm. Why are you here now? After all this time? The woman swallowed hard, her hands trembling. Because I was wrong to leave him the way I did. I thought I was doing what was best, but I should have done more. I should have stayed and fought for him, no matter how hard it was. Her voice broke, and she wiped her eyes. I've been trying to get my life together since that night. I got a job, found a place to live, and I realized I couldn't go on without at least trying to see him again, to tell you how grateful I am, and to say I'm sorry. For a moment, the room was silent except for Ethan's soft babbling. Sarah glanced at Michael, searching for his thoughts and his expression. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but laced with emotion. You left us with no warning, no information, no way to reach you. We've been through so much trying to give Ethan the life he deserves. And now you're here, expecting us to, what? Forgive you? Hand him back? The woman shook her head quickly. No, I don't want to take him from you. I know I don't deserve that. I wanted to see him, to thank you for loving him when I couldn't. Michael exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. He's happy here, he said. He's part of our family now, and we've been doing everything we can to make sure he has a good life. I can see that, the woman said, her voice thick with emotion, and I'm so glad. That's all I ever wanted for him." After a long pause, Sarah spoke again, her tone softer. "You'll always be part of his story. If you want to be in his life, we can figure something out. But it has to be about what's best for him." The woman nodded, her tears flowing freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's more than I deserve." The meeting ended with an unspoken understanding. The woman didn't ask for more than she had already been given: the chance to see her son and the assurance that he was loved. As she left, Sarah and Michael watched her walk down the street, her figure disappearing into the fading afternoon light. Rocky nudged Sarah's hand, breaking her reverie. She looked down at him, then at Ethan, who had fallen asleep in Michael's arms. "She's part of his past," Sarah said quietly. "But we're his future." Michael nodded, kissing the top of Ethan's head. "And we'll make sure it's a bright one." The days following the emotional visit from Ethan's birth mother marked a renewed sense of purpose for Sarah and Michael. They dove deeper into Ethan's care and therapy, hopeful that the glimmers of progress reported by the doctors could become a reality. Each milestone, no matter how small, felt monumental, a testament to Ethan's resilience and the strength of their family. Ethan's physical therapy sessions became the cornerstone of their routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, they would drive to the Children's Rehabilitation Center, a brightly lit facility filled with colorful equipment and hopeful energy. Karen, Ethan's therapist, greeted them with her usual warmth and determination. "Ready to work today, champ?" she said to Ethan as they entered the therapy room. Ethan responded with a giggle, his dark eyes lighting up at the sight of the bright toys scattered around. Rocky, who had become something of a mascot for Ethan's progress, wasn't allowed in the facility but waited patiently in the car. Sarah had joked more than once that the dog might be as invested in Ethan's recovery as they were. One afternoon, Karen introduced a new exercise designed to strengthen Ethan's upper body and encourage movement in his legs. Sarah sat beside him on the mat, holding his tiny hands while Karen gently guided his legs in slow, deliberate motions. "You're doing great, Ethan," Karen said, her voice full of encouragement. "Just like that. Keep going." Ethan let out a soft whimper, a sound of effort and frustration. Sarah bent closer, her voice soothing. "You've got this, baby. Mommy's right here." As if spurred by her words, Ethan's right leg twitched slightly. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement, but Sarah's eyes widened. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. Karen smiled, nodding. "I did. That's a good sign. It means his nerves are responding." Michael, who had been watching from the sidelines, stood abruptly, his hand covering his mouth. "He moved?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah turned to him, tears streaming down her face. He moved. That moment became a turning point for the family. Though progress remained slow, it was progress nonetheless. Ethan's small victories, like holding his head up longer or grasping a toy with both hands, were celebrated with the same enthusiasm as major milestones. At home, Rocky played an integral role in Ethan's therapy. During playtime, he would nudge toys closer to Ethan or lie beside him, his presence a calming force that seemed to inspire confidence. On one occasion, while Michael was helping Ethan practice sitting up, Rocky placed his paw gently on Ethan's leg, as if offering support. "You're his biggest cheerleader, aren't you?" Michael said, scratching behind Rocky's ears. The dog wagged his tail, his loyalty to Ethan unwavering. Despite the challenges, there were setbacks too. Some days, Ethan would cry in frustration, unable to perform the exercises that had come easier the day before. On those days, Sarah and Michael found themselves battling their own doubts and exhaustion. One evening, as Sarah rocked Ethan to sleep, she confided in Michael. "What if we're pushing him too hard?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What if this is all for nothing?" Michael sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "It's not for nothing," he said firmly. "Every little step, every attempt, it's all part of his journey, and we're not giving up on him." Sarah nodded, her resolve returning. "You're right. We've come this far. We can't stop now." The weeks turned into months, and Ethan's progress, though slow, became undeniable. One evening, as Sarah and Michael watched Ethan during his playtime, he surprised them yet again. Propped up on his tummy, he managed to lift his upper body and reach for a small stuffed bear Rocky had nudged toward him. "Look at him," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with pride. "Michael, he's doing it." Michael rushed over, his face lighting up. "You're amazing, buddy," he said, clapping his hands. "You're so strong." Ethan responded with a giggle, his joy infectious. Rocky barked softly, wagging his tail as if joining in the celebration. Though Ethan's journey was far from over, his progress was a testament to the power of hope, love, and perseverance. For Sarah and Michael, every step forward, no matter how small, was a reminder that miracles often came in the form of hard work and unwavering dedication. And for Ethan, his family, both human and canine, was his greatest source of strength. The Patterson home had become a hub of warmth, hope, and the comforting chaos of family life. Between Ethan's therapy sessions, Michael's long hours at school, and Sarah's demanding shifts at the hospital, their days were full, often spilling into late nights. Yet amidst the flurry of activity, love seemed to knit their family closer together. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Sarah realized something felt different. Ethan was giggling in his high chair, flinging small bits of pancake onto the floor, much to Rocky's delight as he eagerly cleaned up the mess. Michael, wearing his usual weekend flannel, was flipping more pancakes at the stove. The peaceful scene should have filled her with contentment, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "Michael," she said softly, placing a hand on her stomach. He turned, spatula in hand, immediately noticing the seriousness in her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern flashing across his face. Sarah hesitated, a nervous smile breaking through. I think I might be pregnant." The next week confirmed it. Sitting in the doctor's office, Sarah clutched Michael's hand tightly as the ultrasound technician pointed to the screen. "There's your little one," she said, her voice cheerful. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the flickering heartbeat. Michael squeezed her hand, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Another miracle," he whispered. As they drove home, the news settled between them, bringing both excitement and apprehension. They had already dedicated so much to caring for Ethan, and the thought of adding another baby to their lives was daunting. Yet neither Sarah nor Michael could deny the quiet joy blooming in their hearts. "How do you think Ethan will feel about being a big brother?" Michael asked, glancing at Sarah. Sarah smiled, her hand resting on her growing belly. "I think he's going to love it. And with Rocky, this baby's going to have the best protectors." The months flew by, filled with preparations for the new arrival. Sarah and Michael juggled painting the nursery, rearranging furniture, and making sure Ethan's needs remained a priority. Rocky, as always, stayed close to Ethan, watching him with his steady, loyal eyes, as if understanding that change was coming. One evening, as Sarah sat in the nursery folding tiny clothes, Ethan lay on the floor beside Rocky. Michael joined her, sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a small onesie up to inspect it. "Can you believe we're doing this all over again?" he asked with a laugh. Sarah chuckled, though her eyes softened. "It's different this time. We've learned so much with Ethan, and we've got each other. That's all that matters." Michael leaned over, kissing her forehead. "You're amazing, you know that?" Before Sarah could respond, Ethan let out a loud giggle, catching their attention. He had managed to grab one of Rocky's toys, a small, squeaky bone, and was waving it triumphantly. Rocky barked softly, wagging his tail. "I think Ethan's ready for his little sibling," Michael said, smiling. "He's already practicing sharing." The day finally arrived on a rainy spring morning. Michael rushed Sarah to the hospital while a neighbor stayed with Ethan and Rocky. The hours that followed were long and emotional, but when Sarah held their newborn daughter for the first time, every challenge and sacrifice felt worth it. "She's perfect," Sarah whispered, gazing at the tiny, wrinkled face in her arms. "Hi, baby girl. Welcome to the world." Michael sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "We did it," he said, his voice full of awe. "Ethan's going to be the best big brother." Bringing their daughter home was a moment of joy and adjustment. Ethan, propped up in his play area, watched curiously as Sarah introduced him to his baby sister. She placed the tiny bundle beside him, holding Ethan's hand so he could gently touch her. "This is your sister, Ethan," Sarah said softly. "Her name is Grace." Ethan babbled in response, his small hand brushing against Grace's cheek. Rocky sniffed the baby cautiously, then settled beside the two children, as if accepting his expanded role as protector. Michael stood back, watching the scene with a full heart. "Our family's complete," he said quietly. Sarah turned to him, her eyes brimming with tears. Complete and perfect. As the days turned into weeks, the Patterson household embraced its new normal. Ethan continued to make strides in his therapy, his progress inspiring everyone around him. Grace, with her bright eyes and soft coos, brought a sense of renewal and hope. And Rocky, ever the steadfast companion, remained at the heart of it all, watching over the children who had become his world. For Sarah and Michael, life was far from easy, but it was rich with love, laughter, and the beauty of family. They had faced the unexpected and come out stronger, proving that with hope and determination, even the most challenging journeys could lead to something extraordinary. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and check out this next story. It's incredibly touching.